say happy 40th. It's hard to say
too hard to
birthday in
say.
there.
So happy 40th.
Forum Club.
All right.
So there's a 40th breath Forum Club. Okay.
All right, 1, 2, 3, go.
Happy 40th Forum Club!
Congratulations. Happy 40th Forum Club.
Happy
Birthday.
Forum Club.
Hey, was it just your birthday?
It was.
You know who else's birthday it is? Forum Club. Happy birthday, Forum Club! Woo! Well, a formal good afternoon. My name is Ed Chase. I am this season's president of the Forum Club. What celebration would be without some kind words and some swag? So let's start with some kind words. I have a very brief letter to read from you from one of our past speakers, Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor. She writes, I am delighted to learn that you will be celebrating your 40th anniversary in March. It was such a pleasure to be with you at your event last February. I received the warmest of welcomes and everyone was so engaging. Your organization reflects everything that I value most highly: commitment to work, devotion to community, and human compassion in all you do. Congratulations on your 40th anniversary, and know that by continuing to stimulate thought and promote dialogue, you will help make our country a better place. In the years to come, I wish you all the joy of dreaming big, working hard, and succeeding in all you do. With warmest regards, Sonia Sotomayor. And no party is complete without some lovely parting gifts. So on your table, you will find the very special, the very limited edition commemorative 40th anniversary Forum Club pen. So make sure you take it home, save it. When you bring it to the Forum Club's 80th anniversary, you are guaranteed free admission to that lunch. If we are still using pens at that point in time. That's the only problem. So I mentioned that we have some of our founding members with us today, and I'd like to introduce them to you. As I read off your name, please rise and stay standing until we've got through all the names. Dr. Bill Adkins, Ted Babbitt, Richard Bernstein, Dr. Edward Michael Easy, Sam Ellington, George Elmore, Willa Farrington, John Flanagan, former United States Congressman Harry Johnston, Ken Kissel, Len Lindahl, Dave McIntosh, former United States Congressman Dan Mica, who flew from Washington to be here for this lunch, Reed Moore, Marty Perry, Ray Royce, Angelo Shirali, and Jackie Winchester. Please, a huge round of applause for our founding members. It is all your fault, ladies and gentlemen. Well, while we're at it, if you are a former president of the Forum Club of the Palm Beaches, please rise and be recognized right now. Former presidents, please rise. Bob, welcome. Welcome, past presidents. Not only are we honored to have Bob Graham with us today, but we are also honored to have several of his family members with us today. His wonderful wife, Adele, daughter, Kendall Elias, and granddaughter, Peyton Elias, are with us today. Welcome, Adele. Welcome, ladies. Well, we saved the meat. We saved the best for last. We want to take a few minutes to honor a man who, through his public service, has honored all of us for decades. If Michelle McGovern, the chairwoman of the club's honors committee, will please come forward and introduce someone who needs no introduction, but will have one today anyway. Michelle McGovern.
Good afternoon. It's hard to believe that by the time the Forum Club of the Palm Beaches called its first meeting to order 40 years ago, Bob Graham had served in the Florida legislature for 10 years and was about to consider his underdog run for the governor's mansion. His call to public service began as a young progressive who had spent his life working the field of his Coral Rock homestead in Miami. That heritage of hard work translated into a unique grassroots campaign whose cornerstone was simply working as an average Floridian. Challenged by a teacher into understanding her struggle better, it was around then that Graham decided he would spend 100 workdays experiencing the regular jobs of citizens across the state. He took this work seriously, often spending a day in advance training to perform the job just as anyone else would for the next day's 8-hour shift. One of those work days as a bellhop even found him carrying the bags of the wife of his opponent, Democratic frontrunner Robert Shevin. Yes, Bob Graham's work days were famous across the state, and it was a tradition he continued throughout his public life. On workday number 365, he checked in customers, handled baggage, and helped serve passengers on a U.S. Airways flight from Tallahassee to Tampa. In total, he performed more than 400 workdays. Graham went on to win the governor's mansion after a 7-way Democratic primary in 1978 and was reelected with a 65% vote margin in 1982. His tenure as governor had a keen focus on education and the environment, and his establishment of the state Everglades program and his administration's effort to purchase thousands of acres of threatened and environmentally important lands makes him one of Florida's greatest environmental champions. In 1986, Bob Graham continued to answer the call to public service when he was first elected to the United States Senate. He was subsequently reelected in 1992 and 1998, always by significant margins. In the U.S. Senate, he continued to focus on issues concerning the environment, most specifically the Everglades. However, he might be best known for his tenure on the Intelligence Committee, which he chaired during and after September 11th. The fact that Bob Graham was asked to continue to serve for 10 years on the critically important Intelligence Committee and subsequently asked to serve on the CIA's External Affairs Advisory Board tells us how valued he is in the intelligence community. Senator Graham was considered as a potential Democratic nominee for Vice President of the United States 4 times, 1988, 1992, 2000, and 2004. In 2004, many of us here in Palm Beach participated in the Bob Graham for President run. However, health concerns steered him in a different direction. Senator Graham is retired now, if you can call it that. It seems that his work ethic continues to call him to serve. He began retirement teaching in the Kennedy School of Government at his alma mater, Harvard University. He then went on to establish the Bob Graham Center for Public Service at his more notable alma mater, the University of Florida. The Graham Center is committed to training the next generation of private and public sector leaders. I can personally attest to the quality of these students, having hired several graduates myself. Graham has published more than 70 editorials on national and international issues. Intelligence Matters, on sale today. His book, published in 2004, shone a light on areas the 9/11 Commission chose to keep dark. And in 2009, he published a citizen's guide to government titled America, the Owner's Manual, Making Government Work for You. There is so much more to say about this genuine Florida treasure and true statesman. We give a special thanks to Adele, your 4 daughters, 11 grandchildren, for sharing you with us over the years. It comes as no surprise that the Forum Club has decided to award Bob Graham with our prestigious Exemplary Elected Officials Award. We save this honor only for elected officials who have retired from public office and whose impact on our community is significant. Senator Bill Nelson sends his best wishes and says, "Bob Graham is the real deal, and I sure do miss him as my fellow senator." Senator Graham, it is my honor to present you with the Forum Club's Exemplary Elected Officials Award. He also happens to be our speaker today, Senator Graham.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you very much, and thank you for this special honor on your 40th anniversary. I'm very moved. You said things that I never learned or had forgotten about. I thank you very much for this opportunity to return to the Forum Club and to share this special afternoon. I want you to know that I am under very tight constraints. Last night, I had dinner with Gail and Ed, and the main thing they wanted to impress me with was not the quality of food or the conversation or hospitality, but that I had exactly 20 minutes to talk today. So I have taken off my watch, and I have placed it here. It is, according to my watch, it's now 12:37. So if I could add 20 to that, I would know when I have to quit. I'm certain they will remind me. In the period before lunch was served, I had the chance to say hello to many old friends who have meant so much in my life, and I thank you for coming today. I want to particularly mention Dan Micah and Harry Johnson, 2 members of the Congress with whom I had the opportunity to serve both in Tallahassee and in Washington. I want to also thank the students with whom I had an opportunity to meet earlier today. If these students are exemplary of the quality of students being produced in the schools of Palm Beach County, this community has a bright future in terms of its future citizens and citizen leaders. The theme of my remarks today are going to be that actions or failures to act have real consequences. I hadn't planned on including this in that list, but since Ed used as the question who was the member of my family who had run for governor, and it was my dad in 1944, I'm going to finish that story. At the end of the campaign, which many people thought my dad would be the first person from South Florida to be elected governor, concluded he finished 3rd in the Democratic primary. The then political editor of the Miami Herald, a man named Alan Morris, who was subsequently clerk of the state house, wrote a column, and he said the fact that Ernest Graham was not elected governor of Florida proves it will be a cold day in hell when anyone from South Florida is elected governor. Well, I had the good fortune to be the first person from South Florida to be elected. And in January of 1979, in front of the state capitol, stood to take the oath of office, and it snowed in Tallahassee. Actions have real outcomes. Michelle, thank you for that very kind introduction, made reference to my work days. One of my earliest work days, I think it was number 6 or 7, was here in West Palm Beach as an iron worker on a building on Flagler Drive. My job was to go up on the 4th or 5th level of this building under construction and set the rebars and then direct the cement pour in the proper place. I will tell you that being an iron worker in 1977, I might have come here for my funeral in the first year of the operation because it was a very dangerous operation. And after the job was over, the man who'd been my boss said, Bob, I want to tell you a few things. One is that they're all kind of iron workers. They're tall iron workers, they're short iron workers. They're skinny and fat iron workers, but I want to tell you one thing. They're no damn old iron workers. And I understood why there were no old iron workers. I've now used up, I think, 4 minutes of my 20. So I'm going to have to move quickly. I want to talk a bit about the subject that came again to our television sets yesterday, and that is acts of terrorism around the world and the United States, and what are we going to do about them. In all the recent incidents of terrorism, one of the first questions asked after the event was who helped these terrorists carry out the plot that they have just so tragically executed. In the case of Paris, the Paris police said that their estimate was that for every suicide bomber, there are between 5 and 10 people who have supported that bomber. They may have helped provide him the financing, they may have been the bomb builder, they may have been someone who inspected the scene, they may have been someone who provided security, but there was always a support network. One of the ironies of 9/11 is that the official position of the United States government is there was no support network, that those 19 people, most of whom couldn't speak English, most of whom had never been in the United States before, were able to carry out such a complicated task without any assistance. As co-chair with Porter Goss, who I hope will be soon another speaker at the forum, of the congressional inquiry into 9/11, and the 2 chairs of the Citizens 9/11 Commission, all 4 of us have publicly stated it was highly implausible that 19 people with their background could have conducted that alone. And so we have continued our interest in determining, was there such a network? What did they do? Who were they? Where did they come from? And why has the United States government, at least up to date, been so successful in hiding the existence of that support network? Let me just tell you one story which occurred in places not far from here. In August and September of 2011, as the 10th anniversary of 9/11 was approaching, 2 independent investigative journalists had spent time in Sarasota. 3 of the hijackers who were living in Delray Beach, but had taken a few months to learn to fly an airplane at a fixed base near Sarasota. These 3 journalists in interviewing the people who had contact with those three, found that there had been a close relationship between those three and a prominent Saudi Arabian family which had lived in Sarasota for 6 years. What made this suspicious was that about 10 days before 9/11, the family, which was a 3-generational, grandparents, parents, children, family, had left their home in Sarasota under what were described as urgent conditions: food on the table, a new car in the driveway, and returned to Saudi Arabia, raising the inference that maybe someone had tipped them off that something was about to happen and they would be better in Jeddah than in Sarasota. These reporters then wrote articles which appeared in the Miami Herald and the Sarasota Herald Tribune describing what they had learned from law enforcement personnel who had done a post-event investigation and from the neighbors who described the goings-on in this home. After those articles appeared, the FBI, first through its Miami office and then Tampa office, released a report in which they said that there had been a full investigation done of events in Sarasota under the direction of an FBI agent. That investigation had concluded that there were no connections between the 3 hijackers and the Saudi family. And third, that all of this information had been made available to the congressional inquiry and the 9/11 Commission. Well, I was aware that the third point was, in my mind, incorrect. I was never informed that there had been any information about a Sarasota involvement, and as a Floridian, I think I would have been particularly attentive had there had been. I checked with Porter Goss. He had the same lack of recollection. Then with Lee Hamilton and Tom Kane, the 2 chairs of the 9/11 Commission, neither of them had ever heard about a Sarasota role. I was making frequent visits to Washington in the fall of 2011 as co-chair of the Commission on the BP oil spill and a member of the Commission on the Financial Crisis. If something was going bad or had gone bad, I was the guy to call to get involved. That's not a comforting assessment. In the course of this, I visited the man who has custody over the papers of the congressional inquiry, and I said, what would you need to do to locate these documents that the FBI has said was sent to us? And he said, I need to know the file numbers and the date of the submission. So I contacted the FBI, told them that I was concerned that none of the leadership of the 2 commissions had any recollection of a Sarasota involvement, would like to see what the material was and why it didn't get brought to our attention, and could they give me the file numbers and the dates. Well, about a month passed, and I went back to the same man, and he told me, I have not received any file numbers or dates from the FBI, but unexpectedly, 2 actual investigative files that were signed by the FBI agent assigned to this case had come into his possession and asked if I would like to read them. I would, and I did. And what these reports, one of which was at the beginning of the inquiry in September of 2001 and the other about 6 months later, what they indicated is that in the report, the FBI agent said the investigation is not complete and identified trails that needed to be pursued. And second, he also indicated that there were many connections between the 3 hijackers and the Saudi family, and proceeded to list a half page of names and relationships. The word that has frequently been used in this is the word that there's a cover-up. I consider this to be well beyond a cover-up. I would use the term aggressive deception. when a federal agency issues a public document that says one thing, when every one of the 3 points in that document is established by information in their own files to be incorrect, and then refuses to release the files to the public, I think that goes beyond cover-up to aggressive deception. In November of 2011, the week of Thanksgiving, Adele and I flew from Miami to Washington Dulles Airport. When we arrived, we were met by 2 FBI agents who said that a FBI official wanted to meet with us at an office that the FBI had at Dulles. I was encouraged that maybe we were going to get some of the information that had been thus far withheld about the situation in Sarasota. I was to be very disappointed. Now, my wife was not disappointed because she was put in a separate room and given as her homework assignment for the evening the FBI manual to read, and she did a hell of a good job of absorbing that. The meeting with the FBI official, who turned out to be the #2 man in the FBI, the Deputy Director, Sean Joyce, basically said at the end of the meeting to get a life, forget about it, we've done everything that we're going to do about this case. And I said, well, what about these 2 files that I read which contradict what you said publicly? He said, well, that agent was not a very good agent, which is not a terrific commentary on the agency's selection of personnel, and that we have documents that contradict what he said. And I said, could I see those? And the answer was yes, and we arranged for a meeting shortly after Thanksgiving. I show up at the downtown FBI office ready to look at the documents which are going to contradict what I have previously seen, and Mr. Joyce came in the room before the meeting started and said there is not going to be any meeting. I have canceled this meeting, and I ask you not to make any more calls to the FBI because I'm directing our people not to talk to you. Now that is the state of what transparency has come to mean as it relates to terrorist attacks in the United States. But it doesn't end there. In early 2012, with the assistance of a very fine First Amendment attorney, a Freedom of Information Act request was filed requesting access to these Sarasota documents. The first response of the FBI was to ask for dismissal on the grounds that they didn't have any documents. Now, we knew they had conducted a 6-month investigation, and it was unbelievable that the FBI wouldn't have written any of this down. The judge found it also to be unbelievable, and he refused their request. The second response, a few weeks later, was privacy. Well, the question was, whose privacy are we protecting? The 3 hijackers are dead. The Saudi family has all gone back to Saudi Arabia. Who are we trying to protect? The judge agreed with that and denied that request for dismissal. And so on the 3rd try, the FBI, after having said there were no documents, produced 80,000 pages of documents, which are now in the office of Judge Locke in Fort Lauderdale for his review to determine which of those papers deserves to continue to be classified and what can be released to the public. And I might say today, March of 2016, there has still been no decision as to our Freedom of Information Act request. So actions or non-actions were taken. What are the consequences of the disclosure of this information? How are we doing time-wise? I've got 228. I'll come close to that. I think there have been three major consequences. One is justice has been denied. There are 6,000 husbands, wives, mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters of the 3,000 Americans who were killed who have been bringing a suit in federal court against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and affiliated entities, essentially charging them with being co-conspirators in 9/11. Thus far, they have made little progress because they've been unable to produce the evidence that would warrant proceeding to a full-scale trial. And the reason they can't meet that test is because the information that they need, such as the two files that I read, have been withheld from them. So now you have the irony of the United States government frustrating its citizens who are trying to get the very justice. If you remember, when President Bush went to the site within hours of the event, he made the statement that we are going to chase these people down across the face of the earth until they face justice. And now that same government is essentially protecting people who, I think, at least there is a very plausible suspicion were involved in 9/11. That's number one. Number two is that if you were the king of Saudi Arabia and you knew what you had done, what your kingdom had done, and you had a good idea that at least the leadership level in the United States knew what you had done, assumedly somebody else has read these documents, how would you interpret that? I think the kingdom is interpreting it as being impunity, that it can do anything it wants without any fear of retribution. And therefore, what it has in fact been doing is continuing to support Al-Qaeda, ISIS, other terrorist groups financially and through mosques and madrasas, schools, which train people in intolerance and jihad, providing the two things that every terrorist organization needs: money and a constant stream of new recruits. That's the consequences, in my judgment, of what we have done. And finally, we have added to the disrespect of the American people towards their government, a government that they think withholds information from them that they have a right to receive. Now, with having used my 20 minutes, could I prevail upon you for another 2? Thank you. Because I want to talk about what does this mean in what's happening today in presidential politics. This is a strange year. I am a Democrat, and it's hard for me to believe that the leading challenger for President of the United States of America is a socialist. We may be a little bit left of center, but we have not gone into that territory yet. And on the Republican side, they have an egomaniac, real estate tycoon, and casino magnate who lives part-time in Palm Beach. Does it get any worse or more suspicious than that? What I think is interesting is not just the strangeness of the candidates, but what this says about the state of mind of a substantial proportion of the American people. I think it says that we have a lot of our folks who are disaffected from government. They're disaffected because of what they see as a dysfunctional government, unable to deal with the real-life problems that they face. They see political gridlock. They see a lack of concern for the needs of average Americans. They see a subservience to special interest and enormous amounts of money. All of those things have been contributing to an attitude which has created the environment in which current candidates can be successful. What can we do about this? I think that there are a number of factors which have contributed to the current state of American opinion about their government. There have been institutional failures within our political parties, failures within the media. There have been failures of personalities to deliver on what they have said in the past. But I believe that of all of the areas that have failed, the most fundamental has been our failure to educate two generations of Americans about what it means to be a citizen in a democracy. And I would use my family as example one. I graduated from Miami Senior High School, go Stingarees, in 1955. I had taken 3 one-year classes in what it means to be a citizen in a democracy. Classes that taught us things like tolerance of other people's opinion, and that compromise was not a bad word, it was a key concept for a functioning democracy. I have 11 grandchildren, one of whom, Peyton Elias, is here today. 8 of those have graduated from high school. 4 of the 8 had zero civics in their 7th to 12th grade period, and the most that any of the other 4 had was 1 semester. We have done a terrible job of educating Americans to what it means to live in this great country. Civics, which used to be a significant part of the curriculum, has virtually been forgotten. And what's left, what little bit is left, is largely almost rote learning about the institutions and processes of government. I mean, I don't need to be taught, for instance, what is the capital of South Dakota. I know it's Minneapolis because I can look it up on Google. But actions have consequences, and I believe the consequence of this 2-generational failure to educate has contributed more than any other to the current state of American democracy. But I now, with the remaining 45 seconds that I've been given, have some good news, a little bit on the immodest and personal side. But this year is your 40th. This year is the 10th anniversary of the immodestly named Bob Graham Center for Public Service at the University of Florida. We are committed We're committed not just to enhancing the level of citizenship at that one university, but have taken a statewide responsibility. I am very proud that another person who has spoken to the forum, Sandra Day O'Connor, allowed her name to be used as the name of the Sandra Day O'Connor Act, which our center largely wrote and strongly supported, which has returned civics at least for a semester. All Florida students will now have to take a semester in civics. And we're going beyond that. It also requires that in the elementary grades, where most of the attention is on learning to read, if you're going to learn to read, why don't you learn some content about things like American history, great personalities in the development of our country, the foundational information that will lead to enhanced citizenship. Florida is moving forward on that front as well. And personally, while I was a senior fellow at the Kennedy School, I started writing a book on the skills of citizenship, not the processes and institutions, but what does a citizen need to know in order to influence government? And that book, I think, will contribute in the many schools in which it is now being used, and you will have the opportunity to purchase a copy of that book when this program is over. At the end of the Constitutional Convention in 1787, Benjamin Franklin was asked as he left the hall in Philadelphia, "Mr. Franklin, what have you done?" And his response was, "I have given you a republic if you are able to keep it." I think that the reforms that we need to make now would tell Mr. Franklin that we are prepared to do what's necessary to keep our republic, and we will keep it for the tall and the short, for the fat and the skinny, and even for the old Americans. Thank you.
Senator Graham, if you think I'm going to get between you and 550 people, you are not in your right mind. So let's go right to questions from the students first. The question from Palm Beach Lakes Law Magnet is first.
Switch the schools.
Okay. Palm Beach Central.
Good afternoon, Senator Graham. My name is Gabriella Caban, and I am from the Palm Beach Central High School debate team. As a member of the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission, you helped investigate the 2008 financial collapse. The Dodd-Frank financial reform law of 2010 was passed to try to stop a repeat of the Great Recession. But banks are vigorously fighting these regulations. Are our banking reforms enough to protect us? Or are we in danger of relaxing laws in the face of huge corporate donations to federal political campaigns?
Well, in a democracy, there are never any permanent victories or defeats. I think that the Dodd-Frank law, which was the primary instrument of trying to learn from the experiences of the early part of the last decade and not repeat them, has gone a long way. It's not the end of the effort, but I believe gives us a very sound beginning and will be beneficial to the confidence of American people in their government and their financial institutions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Are there any
Palm
other
Beach
questions?
Lakes.
Hello, my name is Leslie Castillo. I'm a senior at Palm Beach Lakes High School at the Pre-Law Center. And our question for you is, in today's politically charged environment, who do you think is the young Senator / Governor Graham?
I hope a lot and a lot better. I think there are a number of persons who are emerging as the next generation of leadership in Florida and nationally. If I were a little bolder, I might even mention my daughter Gwen, who is currently a congresswoman, but I don't have that degree of immodesty and insensitivity, so I wouldn't do that. But one of the things that concerns me is that youngest age group between 18 and 29, the so-called millennials, in some ways appears to be the least participatory age group in the country. They have been the lowest, for instance, on voting, including in these recent presidential primaries. Some have offered a more optimistic view that that younger group is beginning to recognize that citizenship is more than just voting, and that they are using the forms of communication which have become available to them that I personally don't understand at all, but which have allowed them to become active, engaged, and effective in other ways. I applaud that development, which I think will then inevitably lead to them being more engaged in the traditional aspects of a citizen in a democracy, such as voting. So I'm encouraged that the climate is being built for a new generation of leadership, and that America will be the beneficiary of that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. We have a couple of questions based on your intelligence background and a couple based on your status as a statesman. So let's start with status as a statesman. You served in the Florida legislature in Tallahassee during a different era. What's the biggest difference between serving in the legislature then and now?
Well, I think the biggest difference are the institutional changes that have occurred. One is single-member districts. That is one over which I think the horse is not only out of the barn, but has gone over the horizon on that. But when I was first elected in Dade County, there were 23 members of the House of Representatives, all of whom had exactly the same geography to represent Dade County. And that gave us the opportunity to divide up. Somebody would be our person for transportation, somebody else, like Mrs. Baker, for mental health, others for education, etc. And we had the chance to develop more than just a superficial understanding of those policy areas. Education was mine primary assignment. That's not possible now when you represent a small portion of the state, and your constituents wouldn't be very happy if you told them, well, I'm sorry, but I'm just not interested in your problem, and that's not my area of expertise. You are expected to know a little bit about a lot of things, and so many are forced to be a quarter of an inch deep and a mile wide. And then second is the advent of term limits, which have had the effect of eliminating much of the knowledge gained only by experience that older legislators had, and has caused legislators to be very focused on the immediate period to the detriment of decisions that are going to have a longer range impact and a longer range determination as to their value. And I think the major area of state government which has suffered by term limits has been higher education. We make an investment in an institution like Palm Beach State College, or the University of Florida, or the medical school at the University of South Florida, the new one at Florida Atlantic. You're not going to get a payoff in the next 5 or 10 years. That's a long-term investment. And if you don't have your policymakers who are looking long-term, you're not likely to get wise decisions. That is within our ability to change. I think politically it'd be very difficult to do, but it's, in my opinion, is a major stumbling block. And then third are people. We've got to continue to encourage good people to serve in government, and with all of the low level of public opinion about government as witnessed by recent and current campaigns, it's hard to encourage a 30-year-old person to say, why don't you uproot your family life, make yourself subject to nasty television commercials, have to go out and raise $500,000, and then maybe you'll get elected to the State House of Representatives. That has I think had a significant impact on the willingness of a lot of good people like Dan Micahs and Harry Johnsons of today to make themselves available. I don't mean to be so gloomy about this, but I don't want to understate the challenge that we have to restore the quality of government that I think we had back in the 1960s and 70s. And let me tell one short story. Can I add that to the first caucus I attended as a new member of the Florida House of Representatives in 1966, we had, at that time, there were 120 members of the House. I think at least 110 of them were Democrats. There were a handful of Republicans. And there was a senior member of the Democratic caucus stood up and said, you know, these Republicans, there aren't many of them, but they're a pain in the ass. And they're always doing things that upset what we want to do. I think what we should do right here in 1966 is begin to plan for 1968 elections. Let's run good people against these Republicans and just wipe them out, and they won't be bothering us. Well, one of the other senior members got up and said, I think that's a bad idea. He said every day during the legislative session, yellow buses arrive at the Capitol filled with school children, and they're there to witness their government in operation. And I make it a point to talk to the school children from my school district. And in addition to telling them something about what's going on in the legislature, I also point out, do you see that fellow over there in the blue sports coat? He's a Republican. They'd never seen a Republican before, and I wanted them to go home to know what one looked like. And I want to continue to be able to educate children as to what Republicans look like. Now the animals have taken over the zoo.
I have three final questions here that can be answered with short answers. If you could relive one...
That Ed, he's a subtle guy, isn't he?
Warned you in advance. If you could relive one term in office, which term in office would that be?
The second term as governor. Governor is like being the quarterback. You've got your hands on the ball every play. You call the plays. If you called a good one, you can experience the excitement of a touchdown. If you called a bad one, you've got 4 300-pound people lying on top of you. That's kind of like what it's like to be governor. And then the first term is a sharp learning curve. I'd been in the legislature for 12 years. My dad had been in politics while I was growing up, so I thought I knew something about the job, but there's nothing like actually being there to really see its complexities. But by the second term, I think I knew what I was doing, and it was really a great 4 years.
Very good. Final two questions are questions about items that are attached to you forever, perhaps. One is, what is the story behind your famous Florida tie?
Well, what's behind it is that there was a fellow who has been a friend of mine for a long time named Bruce Smathers. Bruce was rumored to be thinking about running for governor in 1978. He was then the Secretary of State, and he started wearing Florida ties. And I said, well, if Bruce can do that, I can do that too. So he was the stimulus, and then as I started continuing to wear them, I realized that I didn't have much else going for me, but people really liked the tie, so I kept it up.
And the final question is, do you still carry the notebook? There it is.
Yes, and several of you put your names in it today, for which I thank you. This is my thin, tethered line to discipline and order in my life, and I recommend it. Thank you.
Senator Graham, thank you so much for being with us.
My wife has. Oh, I have about 3,753.
Give or take.
Give or take, yeah.
Senator Graham, thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it. Have a wonderful afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.